Alright everybody, welcome back to another Ask a Dev Unreal Engine live tutorial. My name is Kevin. We try to do these every week, and it is what it sounds like. We do a live Unreal Engine tutorial. Today we're continuing our, hopefully with audio, we're continuing our Fog of War journey. I'm not saying this is going to be the last one, but we're starting to get into some pretty experimental stuff without going into like the crazy legit render buffering path stuff. So today we're going to be taking a look at two ideas I had of using runtime virtual textures and render targets to do Fog of War. So we're gonna kind of break those down. It's gonna be some more material stuff, some pretty simple logic stuff, and then as usual, if we have time at the end, I'll open up to just kind of general questions and everything like that. Thank you everybody else, everybody who's part of the community. We did hit 10K subscribers this past week, which is a lot of fun. Mostly what's cool about it is that the people who do find us, we've got a really cool community. And so this is really just a shout out to all of you and a thank you. Thank you for all of your help in Discord. Thank you for all of your support in Patreon, through tips, through everything that you're doing in all those ways. Our two newest Patreon members, we got WXLK and Puzzasani. Thanks for your support. But seriously, you know, it's been fun doing this. I've learned a ton from you all, and I really appreciate your support. But mostly, I'm just glad that the community is doing such a great job of supporting each other in Discord, helping each other out. And it's just really cool to see people not afraid to ask. No question too big, no question too small, etc. But with that, we've got a lot of like stumbling to do today, because this whole runtime virtual texture and render target thing is a little bit nuts. So we're going to hop in. I'm not going to belabor it other than just to say thank you everybody. It's been fun so far. All right. So who do we got here today? We got a lot of the usual suspects. PVM Weird One, welcome. Matt J, Rusty, good to see you again. Lax is awake, maybe on a normal schedule now. Off the Rails, always good to see you. Great Lindholt and Garrett Lindholt and ASR. Face reveals when someone who hasn't shown their face until now decides to be on camera. That is not, yeah, it's like the opposite of that. Captain Bombeck, Fabian World, and I can see you. Charles, Weird One already said, welcome to the stream. We had a great, also, for those people who were in our last Patreon, dev stream, I found out why our abilities are double firing. Just a real quick update. For some reason, I was adding pawn data twice. I haven't figured out how to fix it yet, but right now, as part of the gameplay ability system, pawn data is being added twice, and I just need to run that down. So I did finally find that. Okay, so with that, let's go. We got stuff to do. Enough of this chit chat. Okay, so here we are. We got Unreal Engine. For the record, this is 5.4 Unreal Engine, top-down character setup, default template, nothing like that. I've got our tutorial folder, nothing too crazy. We have two separate folders in here, one for render target and one for runtime virtual texture, because we're going to be doing both of those in today's tutorial. And I don't think there's anything else you need to know about project setup if you're following along. So let's talk briefly about runtime virtual textures first. That's going to be our first method. And I definitely need my notes for this one because it's fun. So, all right. So basically, a lot of times when we were using runtime virtual textures, a lot of the use cases that we see is we use them for live painting our landscapes. So you'll see people create this runtime virtual texture, and then they'll paint where they want grass or sand, or they'll use it to paint through depth or more rocks or less rocks. There's all kinds of really cool artistic runtime virtual texture stuff. And there's lots of really great tutorials. There's one, I'm trying to remember her name. She does a lot of really cool things with flowers and grass and stuff in an art stylized way. I'll post it in the comments down below afterwards. But if you want to do like the artistic version of runtime virtual textures, I highly encourage you to check that stuff out. But I thought we could use it for Fog of War. So, how are we going to do this? What we're going to do is, much like we have done in the past, we're going to create a plane, and we're going to use the visibility on that plane to reveal where we are. So to do that, what we need is we need the idea of a brush and a runtime virtual texture to receive the values from the brush. So we need two materials for this to work. And what's going to happen is at runtime, the brush is going to update the runtime virtual texture, which is then going to update the visibility, which will then show us what's happening. So we need two materials and a runtime virtual texture. So and I think we may actually need to enable some things in our project settings. So let's just double check that real quick. Let's see if I type virtual textures, enable virtual texture support. I am going to check this box. I believe that is the only thing I need. Okay, so let's just go with that. And then we'll right click and let's just type runtime virtual texture. And I'm going to call this runtime virtual texture. And let's call this brush capture. Or let's call this fog of war capture. Fog of war capture. Okay. And if we open this up, generally speaking, we don't need to make a ton of changes in here, but I am going to show you a couple things that happen as we work with this. So for now, let's just save that. And then what we need is the idea of a brush and the idea of a material that receives the brush. So let's create a new material, and we're going to call this material brush. Let's call it, actually, let's just keep everything consistent. We're going to call this the fog of war brush. All right, and our fog of war brush is going to be pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy. And we're going to basically, we'll keep all of this here. If we right click and we type runtime, there's going to be a whole bunch of things that we can use. All right, and we need a runtime virtual texture output. This is what is going to receive whatever color we want and put it into the runtime virtual texture stuff. And then we need a value. So in this case, we're just going to use a gradient brush. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's do a radial gradient, a lot like we've been doing in some of our previous stuff, where the idea is we are going to be drawing with this radial gradient. I'm not even going to change the default values of this. We're just going to keep that pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's apply and save that. Then let's go back and let's make our fog of war capture material. So this material is going to be a material. Let's call this fog of war result. Sure, let's just call it fog of war. Fog of war. We'll just call it the fog of war. Okay. And you know what? I am going to do one other thing here, because just for naming, because I'm going to have two different methods in this tutorial. There's going to be the render target version, and then there's going to be the runtime virtual texture version, and I don't want to get these two confused. So I am going to insert a quick little thing just to keep them separate for when we go, rather than starting a whole new project, we can hopefully do it all in here. Okay, so here's our runtime virtual texture fog of war. Now this one is a little bit different. And what we need to do in here is we need to, okay, we're going to keep this as this surface, etc. But once again, we need to get our runtime virtual texture stuff, and we're going to get the sampler. All right, and the virtual texture that we are going to be sampling is our fog of war capture. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to feed the color from this into our opacity, is eventually where it's going to go to. But you can see we can't actually connect to this. Now, if we do this, it's going to be the wrong color. And what I mean by that is, let's change this. We gotta change this to translucent for this to kind of show up. What I mean is right now we're going to be flipping what we're doing. It's going to be painting the wrong color, and I'll show you here in a second. Okay, so we have our opacity. This is default lit, translucent, surface, all that looks good. We're going to apply fogging. Let's double check our runtime virtual, and I'm trying to make this the simplest setup as possible. We can change this to be, we don't need this to be base normal roughness. We can just change this to be base color for our runtime virtual texture. We don't need all of that stuff. If we come back here, this we can reset to be just base color. So we're taking the base color and we're feeding that into the opacity. So let's apply that and save it. And then let's, in our map, let's create two things. Okay, first, let's create a plane. And this plane is going to be our fog of war. Zero out our values. Pop this off the ground a little and scale it up. Okay. All right, so this is our fog of war, and the material that we're going to be putting on this is going to be our fog of war material. Okay, and we need to do a couple of other things with this material. And you can already see we've got the wrong color because this is gray right now. But let me just double check one other thing for our virtual texture stuff. Yeah. Okay. So in here, one of the things that we want to do is we also want to change our collision stuff, because if we try to play right now, we're going to be actually running around on top of the fog of war. We don't want that. Okay, let's go back here. We need to update our collisions, so that's going to be under our physics, or we could do it under all. Actually, let me pull this out so you can see it. I did not mean to dock that. Okay, so up here, if we look at all, we want to, character cannot step up on, collision presets is no collision, that's fine. And then we do need one other thing. We're going to draw in the virtual textures, and we're going to get it from our one runtime virtual texture that we've got. Okay, so that's all of that. So we've kind of set up the plane now, but we're not seeing anything, but you can see our character is no longer on top of it. That's cool. But we need the idea of this brush, because this brush is actually the thing that draws onto this texture. Okay, so let's just temporarily see if I can do a stepping stone for you all to kind of make this leap. If we create this plane, okay, and we apply our texture to this, our brush to this plane will become our brush. And you'll see where I'm going here in a second. So window, details, details 1. Let's apply our brush, our runtime virtual texture fog of war brush as the material. Okay, and then let me double check to see if there's anything else I'm missing. If we press play, if I press F8 to eject, F8 ejects, this is our plane, I can pick it. Oh, I need to make it movable. Let's see here, let's make it movable. Okay, play, press eject, and if I move this, so far not drawing anything. So we've missed something in our settings. So basically when this plane moves around, we should be seeing it drawing on our runtime virtual texture, but we've missed something. So we're gonna go back and find it. So let's see here. In our plane, underneath, let me just double check here. Do I also need the virtual texture there? Yes. I think I need the virtual texture on the plane too. So here we go. Did I already put it here? No. So this is going to be our runtime virtual texture capture. Okay, so that's the thing. We're going from virtual texture. Still not drawing. Not happy, Bob. Not happy. All right. Oh, wait. Did I miss something here? Let's take a look at this, y'all. We've got our runtime virtual texture. We're set up AK base color. I'm not worried about that. Oh, advanced, that's right. I need to, let's see, we're gonna keep the enable clear. Adaptive page. Let's check our brush, no, our fog of our runtime virtual texture base color. This is set to our capture base color. Enable the paging table. Absolute world position is fine. Clamp, feed to no opacity. And this material is a surface, translucent, default lit with all of these things. We have all of our volumetric stuff. That is for later. And let's go 1- to flip this around for the opacity. And I want my base color to be black. It's interesting, this is new. I don't remember seeing this here in previous versions where you would set the base color here. So we'll set that to black. So let's apply that. Let's make sure all this stuff is applied. Save. Save. Let's go. All right, well, it is black now. That's cool. So either we are not drawing to this thing, or we're missing a magic checkbox, as usual. Oh, dude. ASR 59, you are a rock star. You are absolutely right. I totally forgot my runtime virtual texture volume. That's exactly what it is. Thank you. This is why we do these live. Or this is also why the pain of doing them live. So hero of the stream today is ASR. So we do need a volume, much like we need a nav bounds. We need our runtime virtual texture volume. So let's go ahead and add that. And this is going to be a runtime virtual texture volume. Okay, and when we put this in here, wait, did it make it? I don't think that clicked. Runtime virtual texture volume. Oh, I'm still playing. That's why. Whew. All right, here we go. Runtime virtual texture volume. There we go. So here's our volume. And we are going to, in our settings for this thing, let's bring up our details window again. Okay, in our settings for this one, let's take our bounds actor and use let's see here. Where is it? I want this to be, let's take this one. Okay, so that automatically set our bounds. So this thing is now the size of the bounds, which is cool, but I'm actually going to increase this a bit for our runtime virtual texture. Actually, it didn't take it. Let's try that one more time. There we go, plane one. And then set bounds. It's not doing that either. Okay, so let's try. All right, let's just do it by hand. Let's go 2500. 2500. We'll zero this out. We're making it big enough to fit the scale of our map. So let's try 3500 and 3500. Okay. So now that bounds now is big enough to cover everything. So this is now the size of, you can kind of see this box here, and we're making sure it overlaps our texture. Okay, so now let's see, did that help? Did I miss a setting on the runtime virtual texture volume? Virtual texture, I did. We need the virtual texture that it's going to use. Okay, and just because this is so fun, let's save all. And let's see where we're at. Still nothing. We may be going to part 2 of this tutorial very quickly. So in here, our runtime's virtual texture volume. Interesting. We set our bounds. Theoretically, this should be drawing to our mesh already, but we've missed something somewhere. We just need to find it, y'all. Oh, wait, is it because I may need to restart because I loaded that stuff in the settings? Let me see. Yeah, let's try a restart. Because I remember I checked that stuff in the project settings. It's possible I needed a restart. So let's just do a quick restart here and see if that helps us. There we go. Okay, it's there. You can't see it, but it's there. So let me move this down below. It's drawing, you just can't tell. Okay, let me show you how you can see. All right, so let's take this plane and let's escape out. And let's go visibility. What is the thing I wanted to do here? I think if I set it hidden in game, hidden in scene capture. Let's try hidden in game. Is that gonna make it? No, that's not what I want. I think I want it hidden in scene capture. There's a way for me to make this invisible, but not. Hold on, let me check my settings. I want this plane to be we have our runtime virtual texture. We have our scale, we have our tick. You can see it's working. You can see it's drawing through. So that is working. Okay, so it's actually drawing now, which is cool. Now we've got to figure out what is happening with why when we play, what the magic setting was. And we also don't want shadows. We definitely don't want shadows on this thing. So casting shadows is done. And then let's check what we did for visibility. Visibility. Visible. Visible in scene capture only. That's the one I wanted. That's the checkbox I was looking for. Okay? Cool. So now when we play, haha, whew. Okay, so we got it so that it's now drawing, which is cool. If I eject out, you can see that if I grab this plane and I move it, it draws where it is. So the idea now is that we want this brush to be attached to our actor, but without moving our actor. Right now, our brush is messed up because our actor can stand up on it. Okay, thank you very much, ASR. I'm just checking for questions. Is the plane within the volume of the vertical axis? It is. It was. It was just I needed to restart. Okay, but this plane though, even though we've got it here in the scene, this is not ultimately what we're going to do. What we're ultimately going to do is we're going to put this plane on our top-down character. So in our blueprints, let's do the same thing in our blueprint here, okay? And let's do this too to make this a little bit easier for you all to read after the restart. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a plane, and in the viewport, let's take this and move this down here. And for all of the settings and details for this guy, let's just go ahead and character cannot step up on it. It doesn't generate overlap. We're doing no collision, and we are changing it so it is visible in scene capture, This one says when true will only be visible in scene capture. So that's the one that we checked. We do need to get our brush material on this. So let's get our fog of war brush material on here. And that should give us our brush. So compile and save. And then when we play, I forgot to do the virtual texture stuff. So down here, we do need the virtual texture info filled in. So let's go ahead and fill this in. Compile and save. Let's try that again. I missed something again. Too bad I deleted the plane that was working, huh? Oh my goodness, you all. Okay, so the plane, you know what? Let's just take this and go visible. We'll turn this back on. Let's bring it up a little bit. Okay, it's working. All right, let's go back to that. I think part of the problem is this thing's too far, so let's go ahead and bring that back. Compile and save. Press play. There we go. So now, wherever we go, our fog of war is following us. But it's not really working like fog of war yet, right? So we got a couple things. So there's a couple cool things about this method, and there's a couple things I don't like about this method. And we'll talk about it a little. One of the cool things about this method is when I realize that the fog of war is too small, all I have to do is come in here and I can scale the plane up. So I'm just going to scale this plane up, and now when I press play, my fog of war is a much bigger size. So I can do things like without having to do all the line traces and everything like that. So from that standpoint, that's kind of cool. Let's go a little bit bigger. It's kind of cool. But this method also does have other issues with it. So for example, if you get too far above the volumes, it no longer draws. So you're gonna have to do work to make sure that the distance that this thing is away doesn't interfere. Now there's also a couple other things I want you to notice while we're here. I'm going to fix it. First off, you can see this jittering. Second off, you see these rings? It might be hard if you're not watching this in 4K, which is why I usually try to stream at 4K. That's also a note, like you can always go back and change the stuff, but there's these rings. These rings are a quality bar setting. So let's do a couple more things to make this a little bit more entertaining. So in our runtime virtual texture, if we turn off, where was that setting? Enable texture compression. Let's turn that off, and let's go back and just see what that one change does. Now the rings are gone because there's no compression happening. So we get a nice, much smoother fog of war here. Now the other thing is, you're thinking, well, wait, I can see all these objects. Well, what we can do to cheat this so that it works like fog of war. In previous fog of war tutorials, we had the plane above all of the items, but then you have to have your fog of war brush also above all of the items. But what we can do with this fog of war plane is we can actually check, let's see, where's our details panel? Window, details. What we can do is we can check in here. Oh no, not in here, it's in the material. It's in the material. Let me put this over here. So here is our fog of war capture. Under here, depth test. Depth test. Disable depth test. So what that's going to do is it's going to make it so it just draws over everything. So now it's a legit fog of war. When we go around, you can see it's like showing, it's revealing the stuff underneath, because what's happening is it's a render trick. Even though the plane for fog of war is at our feet, it's actually being drawn on top of everything else because we've disabled the depth test. So in that way, this is kind of nice because we can just scale this to cover everything and not have to worry about it. Okay? Cool. So what was the other thing that I wanted to show you with this? Yeah, so the minute we go up, we're no longer, our fog of, basically our paintbrush is no longer in the volume. So making the draw permanent should be possible. What you need is, but it used to be, basically the short answer is it used to be possible. I have not found a way how to do it yet in 5.4, but here's the general logic. What you need to do is you need to write to a runtime virtual texture, the same one that you're sampling from. You used to be able to do that in previous versions of Unreal. You can no longer do that legally now. So I actually haven't found a way to do that yet, but we can do that with the render targets. So we'll get to that in a second. So that's one thing, is making it permanent. The other thing that's interesting is if you look at our overdraw, where the whole thing is red, which is not extremely bad on the scale, but it's just in the slightly bad range. And the trick with this is if we do the same stuff that we did previously, where rather than using opacity, we switch this and we use, we make this a masked material. When we connect this to our opacity mask instead, we want to make sure we take our our specular down to 0 and our roughness down up to 1, so it's not shiny at all. We'll apply that. When we play this now, you'll notice that the cutout's working. Oh, we also need to make sure that this does not cast shadows. So shadows, let's turn off our shadows so we don't get weird artifacts. Okay. Okay, so we have our fog of war cut out, and when we look at our render texturing, we have a nice green color here. We're not in the bad range anymore, which is, you know, just something to note. However, depth tests no longer work. So you would absolutely, in this case, and I'm not going to do it here because I want to get to the not the runtime virtual texture, the render target version. You would have to move this up like we did in previous tutorials so that this was here above everything. But you'll notice that this placing of this doesn't work anymore because it's basically in world space straight above the character. So we would need to move this plane backwards, I believe would do it if we move. Let's try just moving it back behind our character some distance. There we go. So this might be a case where what you might need to do is actually do a line trace to figure out the best place for it, because as your character moves, you'll notice that it's rotating, right? That's not what we want. So right now this is parented to the capsule. So there's a couple different ways to counter this. Probably the easiest one is you could just do a line trace wherever it hits your fog of war plane, that's where you position your brush. So that would work. Okay, so now as far as your question, it's become illegal. Illegal in the sense that if you try to read from a runtime virtual texture in the same material that you write to it, and there's at least 1 or 2 tutorials out there about doing that. You used to be able to do that. Now you get an error and it won't even work. It won't even let you use it. So that's what I mean by illegal, not by like actually like legit. Sometimes I forget. We do have a lot of multilingual viewers. So yeah, not the police are coming type of illegal. Okay. Yeah, we could also deproject to the center screen. That's another thing we could do. The other thing we could do is to get the circle to line up, you could also use your animation blueprint and back out the rotations. I've done that for textures that you don't want to rotate before, etc. But that wraps up method, real-time virtual texture method. It's kind of like a start for you all to kind of work with and potentially experiment. What I'm specifically talking about is if you get another texture, what you can do is you can take and you can do an output or replace and basically at runtime literally be drawing to the runtime virtual texture. If I figure that out, I will obviously post an update. But in the grand scheme of methods that we've covered for Fog of War, I'm probably not going to use this one. So far my favorite is the Niagara VFX one. Okay. All right, cool. So now that we've got that, let's apply and save. Now let's switch to the render target version. Okay, so to do that, I'm actually going to delete a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to delete this plane though. You know what? Yes, let's delete the plane. Let's go back to scratch. So we deleted all of our planes. We've got all that. Let's go to our render target. Okay, so for our render target method, and let me bring up our notes. Okay, so for those of you that are not aware of what render targets can be used for, but basically you can do cool things with render targets where basically you are creating materials at runtime. And a great way, or some great examples of that, are for scene captures. You'll see it to do things like when a character looks at an object. Back before the days where we actually had ray tracing, like to create a mirror, there was a camera facing the other way, and it would basically feed a live version of that image back to you from the gameplay from a different camera. Another great thing that you'll see it used for a lot of times is for character loadout screens. Like in the middle of the game, you'll get a different camera that shows you your real character, but in a different place. That's often done using a render target. We used it in our drone tutorial. We used the render target so that you could see what the drone saw and fly the drone through the drone's eyes, if you haven't seen that tutorial. So there's a lot of different uses for render targets. And we're just going to add one more use to that. And in this case, we're going to do one more method here. Let me just get my notes up real quick. So many projects. And this shouldn't take too long either, but I do know we need 2 render targets. Wait. Or do we need 1? Hold on, let me double check. Okay. So let's create a render target. Okay, and this is going to be our render target fog of war spotlight. Okay. And this is basically not a lot, right? We're not going to do a lot with this. We're just going to update our resolution a little bit to make it a little bit bigger, just in case. We can always play with this to see how much of a difference it makes in a little bit. And then what we need is we need a material. In this case, let me just double check that I'm getting this right. Lamps. Okay, cool. So let's create a material. This material is going to be called our render target fog of war composite. Okay, and this is going to be the composite, everything composed together in the end. And it should be pretty straightforward. It's going to have inside of it, we are going to make this translucent like we did with the other one. It is a surface. We can keep it default, let all this stuff, that's fine. And then what I want to do is we are going to texture sample, I believe. Texture sampler, texture sample. And the texture that we're going to be sampling is our render target spotlight. Okay? And then this, we're going to clamp. Let's clamp this. The reason we're clamping, now there's 2 different ways we can clamp. We've been over this before. Clamping gets it to 0 to 1 because it's possible for materials to go beyond 1, and we're going to be feeding this into opacity. So anything beyond 1 doesn't make sense. We can clamp it, or we can use a saturate. Saturate is like a cheap clamp. Should do the same thing. So for now, we'll just go with saturate, and then let's invert it, because I know the colors we're going to be getting are going to be the inverse of what we want, and we'll feed that into the opacity. And then we want a base color for this to be black, because let's just make the base color of our fog of war black. So I'm going to hold the 3 key and left click. That's going to give me a vector constant 3. They're going to feed into this base color. So let's apply that. Okay, let's save that. Let's save this. Let's get our plane. We need a plane in here. So this is round 2, part 2. Shapes, plane. This is going to be our fog of war plane. Fog of war. Let's bring back our details for y'all to see. Kill this. And let's go back to 0. Just to make this easy. And move this in place. Of course. Alright, so scale this up. Okay. So let's just get this working first, and then we'll do the same thing we did with the depth and all those kinds of things. Alright, and then the material that we're going to put on this is going to be our fog of war result. Okay, so we've got black. However, we're not drawing anything yet. We're not doing any of the stuff that we need to do yet. Okay, because we have some work to do in order to get our render target to work properly. And we also do need to make sure that our composite material, that this is set to linear color down here. Okay, cool. So now we need another material, and this one is going to be our fog of war material, which is going to be the thing that actually does the work, I believe. Hold on, let me just double check my notes. Yeah, okay, so let's do this. Let's take and do another material. And this material is going to be our spotlight material. This is going to be our RT fog of war spotlight. I'm calling it the spotlight because it's like it's shining down. There's probably a better name for it, but we're just going to roll with it. All right, and then all we're going to do in here is we are going to take, this is going to be a surface. We're going to set our base color to be black, because we're going to be taking the output of this of white or black, because remember we're feeding this into opacity. All right, and I want this to be, let's go 0 in specular, let's go 0 in that, and 1 in roughness, because I don't want it shiny at all. And then we're going to feed into this. We have a couple options. We could feed in a base, we could feed in a emissive. Let's just go into emissive. So what are we going to feed in? Well, let's make our usual radial gradient. So radial gradient exponential, this is going to feed into our emissive color. And if we look at this on a square, you can kind of see what it looks like. Let's make a couple of changes. We want the texture coordinate for this. Texture coordinate. So basically these are the U's and B's. Okay. And then we have a center position. And the center position is going to be a location. So let's make a vector 3. I'm going to left click Alt V, and I'm going to call this the location. We've done similar stuff in previous fog of wars. Okay, we're going to mask it this time though. The reason being is we're working in texture space, coordinate space. That was the wrong mask. We want the component mask, y'all. So where is it? Component mask. So we only want the RNG values. These are going to be X and Y, as if they're UV coordinates. We're going to feed this in. Well, let's make a new variable for, and you can see it moved to 0, 0 on our coordinate system. So if I change this, by the way, if I open our default value, if I change R, remember R is not R anymore, R is X. If I change R to 1, it'll move to the right side. If I change Y, which is G, to 1, it'll move to the bottom. So this is a 0 to 1 mapped plane. That's important to understand. This is a little different than the stuff we've done before with how we're mapping this. Okay, so with that, now what we can do is we can set some different stuff for our radiuses. Our radiuses, or radii, I don't know what the version of that is, but these are going to be a little different than what we've done in previous tutorials, because the reason being is in UV space, it's smaller, right? Because that's stretched to the whole plane, and you may have to change it depending on how big your plane is. So there's some arguments there as to, you know, how you may want to do this or not, but let's just go ahead and add in one more variable. This is going to be our density. You can make these all variables that you set later, but for now, just for the purpose of rolling through this, so you can see this all working, let's just get this all working. Okay, so we have a material now. All right, that is our spotlight material. It is a surface opaque default lit, etc. I think that's what I want. Okay, all that should be good to go. Cool. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to actually create this material. So give me 1 second to think, because my brain just stopped working. Okay, so here's what we want to do. Let's, in our top-down character, we need to create a copy of this material. Okay, so in our blueprint graph, we've got nothing in here right now. Let's go to our begin play. So far we've just set up the materials. Now we need our begin play. Okay, and we want to create a dynamic material instance here. And the reason we want to do this is, if you recall from previous tutorials, if you want to make any changes at runtime, it needs to be a dynamic material instance. In this particular case, this is going to be our Fog of War spotlight. FOW spotlight. Okay, I'm not going to be worried about naming it or anything. I am going to make this a variable, and we'll call this our Fog of War spotlight. Yeah, sure. Okay, and then all we're going to do is, when we're done, we are going to create a render target. And I want it to be 2D. No, wait a second. Is that what I want? Hold on, that's not what I'm expecting to see. Create render target. I mean, that is what I'm expecting to see. Oh, no, I don't want to create a render target. I already have a render target. I am going to, let's just clear it. Let's clear the render target so that we start each time empty. Clear a render target. And the render target we're going to clear is going to be our, where is it? Render target Fog of War spotlight. Okay. I think that's the one I want. We may have to come back and revisit that. Okay, so this is going to clear it. Then what we need to do is on tick, like we've done before, we need to figure out where we're going to draw this, because we got to get the UVs, right? We're working in UV space. So let's go event tick. All right, and let's do a line trace. And let's do a line trace just for safety. We'll do a line trace from our camera. So get the actor location. Do I like this? Actually, we'll do that second. Let's see what time it is. 12:20. Oh, we got to move. All right, let's do this a little bit different. Let's get the actor. We're going to do this. We're going to do a line trace above and below like we do for IK feet. Okay, so get, so let's get our location. Get actor location. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to this a vector. So this is a little bit of vector math. So let's say we want to draw from, we could draw from a socket above our head, or we can pick a value. Let's try 250, and let's go minus 250. What this is going to do is this is going to create a start and end. Basically, it's going to pick a point above my head and a point below my feet, or above. Actually, it's going to pick a point above the capsule and below the capsule. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a line trace. Now, for now, I think for time, we'll just do, I would ultimately do this in a different trace channel, but let's do line trace by channel. We're going to cheat this, and we'll see if we have time. We're going to go start and end. And then what we'll do is we'll get our out hit. And from this, let's find the UV position. This gives us our UV position. Okay, and we're going to split this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set a vector parameter value on our Fog of War spotlight. no, I don't want to set this. I want to get the fog of war spotlight, and I want to set a vector parameter value. And in this case, because we're using UV, let's split this. Come on, split this pen struct. We're going to go X is R, Y is G. Okay. And then the final thing we're going to do is we are going to draw this material to the render target. Draw material to the render target. And the render target we're going to be using is our render target fog of war spotlight, I believe, and the material is this one. Okay. This will be a miracle. Oh, couple things. So, first off, let's disable all our collisions on this plane. So, can the character step up on? No. Collision presets, no collision. Let's go custom. Let's open this up. Okay, so this is why I would use a separate channel actually. So let's ignore all and just do a visibility trace for right now. We'll do block. Okay, and let's see if our character's even where they're supposed to be. Okay, our character's where they're supposed to be. Now let's check our trace here. Here's our trace, debug draw. Let's turn this on for 1 frame. Are we getting the proper position? So we are getting the position. So this is where our trace is working. So we're getting a position, but right now we're not getting our render target. Our render target is not updating. And the interesting thing is, part of the way we know this is because usually when you finish, you'll see this draw in here. So I missed something. And I just got to figure out where I missed a step. So our spotlight currently is 1024, 1024. We have our wraps from the texture group, all that's fine. That's cool. And then we have our composite. Our composite is set to get texture automatic view map. Our render target is our spotlight. It is set to linear color. I am going to clamp this just in case for some reason. This shouldn't be the problem. Our base color is black and our material is a surface translucent default list. Translucency. All of this stuff looks normal. So many settings. Interesting. Okay. Our render target. This all looks correct, y'all. Oh, wait, no, we didn't set the value. No, we missed it. We didn't set the value. Hold on. Yeah, we didn't actually set this. This needs to be a location. I was like, wait, I didn't type location in anywhere. Let's try that. Okay, so still nada. So let's see here. Let's try something. Rather than feeding that into our opacity, interesting. What material is this set to right now? This is set to window details, details 1. This is currently set to our composite, which is what it should be, I'm pretty sure. It is. We are getting our trace. Oh, trace complex. We do need it to be trace complex too. Did I do that? Trace complex. No, we did not. Still nothing though. We keep knocking out the checkboxes, but we still got nada. Oh yay. All right, so we have that. And what collision is this set to? Collision probe only. Okay, we'll go probe only. We're gonna block visibility. That should be it. Okay, no, that's not blocking anymore. So that's not getting a value. So query only, let's see. Yeah, that's getting a hit. Let's just double check our values. Make sure we're getting, let's print string on these. Let's see if we're getting reasonable values here. So we're gonna print string on our UX. Nope. We're not getting good values. So that is our part of our problem. What's interesting is if that's the case, when we come up here to the top, I would have expected at least to see a hole somewhere on this. It's 0, 0, but I don't. So we do have more than one problem. Okay. So our first problem is we are not getting the UV values out of our trace. So let's change this. Let's change this to work the way I had originally done it. This always happens when I change things on the fly. So let's do, I think it's trace in here. Let me find my trace, new trace channel. We're gonna call this fog of war. I'm gonna change it to, oh, actually I wanted to change the default response on this to ignore. Accept that. I don't think this should do, I don't think this is the problem, but let's compile and save this. Let's take this and let's change this trace channel to be fog of war. Let's go ignore all. We're gonna block our fog of war, which is cool. And then what we're going to do inside of our character is we're going to trace on fog of war. And we're going to get our out hit on our UV channel. Okay, compile and save and play. The fact that that is still 0 is just wrong. So let's see what is going on. Is there something about our plane? Okay. Okay, so let's see here. We've got a plane. You know what? Let's zero this plane out. Okay. And then I am going to, in this fog of war composite material, I'm going to disable the depth test right now, just so that I can get rid of this Z fighting thing. And it will actually look like fog of war. Now the interesting thing is, if we take this and we move it into place, and then the height is, it's really hard to see the height. We need to get it so that it's on the floor in a way that the character, we're getting our trace. So our trace success is there, but even though this is hitting, it is not getting us a value. So for example, and just as a sanity check, if we get our out hit and we break this and we get our location, if we print this instead, Let's watch this update. Yeah. See, this is clearly working. So all that's happening is we are not getting our, oh, it's gotta be, I wonder if it's just project settings. Is it UV? Support UV from hit results. You know, y'all, I joke that we're really paid professional checkbox hunters, but it's not. It's not a joke, man. All right, so we need to check a box, people. Okay, here we go. So let's check that. Go ahead and press play. All right, so we're getting, now let's see if we're getting UVs now. And also, do we need to restart? We do. We need to restart our project. So restart now. Let's save everything. Save everything. Coming right back. The weird one, the reason I'm not passing the impact point X and Y is because in this tutorial I'm doing it a little bit differently. I'm actually using the UV coordinates instead. Oh my gosh, one checkbox. Okay, so now we actually have our material working from the standpoint of, like, we were doing everything right, but you can see what I was talking about. When you're done, if you look at your render target, you can kind of see like where it last drew. So these will update as you go. So you start off and this basically just kind of draws. So we have our runtime, not a runtime, I'm confusing the two. So this is our render target version. Okay, now let's clean up a couple things here real quick. And let's do one more kind of experiment / show you all something. All right, we don't need our prints. We can get rid of those. We can just trust that those work. We don't need our hit result anymore. We do not need to draw a debug because all this just works now, which is cool. Okay, so now we have it. Now, where are we as far as performance? Red. We're in the bad zone. How bad is it? If we do a stat FPS on this by pressing the back tick and typing stat FPS, it's still over 100. As we've discussed in previous Fog of War type videos, I'm not stressed about this. All right. However, if we do switch this texture, it gets interesting, because if we go to the render target version of it and we go to the composite material, we change this to be, rather than translucent, masked. We take this and we feed this into our opacity mask. We get rid of our spec, and we get rid of our roughness, and we apply. This should still work. Let's make sure we're not casting shadows on this, which we're not anymore when we press play. So now we have a nice solid circle. However, because we can no longer check the depth ignore, we have to go back to doing it the way we were doing it before, where what we do is we take this plane and we move it up in space. If we move this plane up in space to cover our whole level, what we get is we get a disconnect. Our trace is no longer hitting. Our trace is no longer hitting because, remember, we're only tracing from above our character's head slightly, or capsule, to below the capsule's feet, just to cover the objects. What we can do, and this is what I was hinting at before, is in this trace, rather than using above and below the character, what we can do is we can get the camera location, get the location, get the world location of the camera. We can feed that into the start, and we can feed the end into the end, the actor location into the end, theoretically, the way this has gone. And now we get a mask that is approximately, like, it basically does a better job of cutting out as it passes through, so we'll always be able to see this kind of where we are. And then we're back into the same stuff that we were in some of our previous tutorials as far as whether or not you're going to use dither or not. However, one thing to note, as we mentioned before, if you press F5, as far as our shader complexity and overdraws, we're back in the green with this one. For the one thing in our level that is used for Fog of War, for the performance hit. You'll notice here in the top right it's hard to see with the current shading model, but you can see even masked, even though it's there, we're still, actually it kind of looks slower, but that could also be because of the streaming. So literally, like, there's a lot of things to factor, but the point is, whether this is translucent or masked is not such a huge performance impact to me that I'm going to forego the beauty of the translucency. So that was what I wanted to show you all for kind of our next Fog of War. Now, there is something that's worth noting. If you wanted to, you could have a second runtime or render target. I keep mixing the two up because they sound the same. You could have a second render target in this method where what you're doing is you're clearing it every time, and you could reveal where you had been with a certain grayed out effect. All of that being said, of the methods we've used so far, I'm not going to use these two. You're like, what did you do? What did you just say? I thought it would be cool to show you how these work, because sometimes render targets and runtime's virtual textures are a little bit hard to wrap your head around. And as you saw, don't be discouraged. It's all about the checkboxes, seemingly, right? It's all about the checkboxes. So so I thought it would be good to show you these to kind of put a bow on our Fog of War stuff. I think if we revisit Fog of War in the future, it is going to be the crazy render depth pass C++ version of it. But I just don't see that happening. I think a lot of our community are focused on solo dev or indie dev projects. There are, in many of the methods that we've covered from a performance standpoint, none of them are concerning. And, have we tested it on mobile or anything like that? No, but at the same time, hey, if you get your game on Steam, you're a rock star. I mean, the amount of just sheer drive it takes to keep going and get stuff out there. Everybody who's done it, all you've worked on these games, mini games that you all have put out, I'm like, bravo, good job, y'all. So for what we're doing, my personal favorite in this entire series of Fog of War stuff, from a visual standpoint and flexibility standpoint and what it can do in a 3D volume, I gotta say, is the Niagara version of it, like the VFX based version of it. The very quick and dirty image plane version that we did, I think I would use in a 2D game as like a setup. And then this one, we have one more thing that we could do that is along these similar lines that we're going to talk about, which is, rather than a Fog of War on the map that you're playing on, will be a reveal on your dungeon map. So we are going to do a dungeon map tutorial where the dungeon will show you where you are and where you've been, and it's kind of the same idea of Fog of War. And in that case, we're going to be using possibly render targets, possibly runtime virtual textures to basically mask off our run and stuff. But point is, hopefully you have the building blocks and understanding, and also, like, I do this every day, and I just spent the last hour fumbling through this. So if you're at all intimidated by render targets or runtime virtual textures, don't be. It's checkbox hunting. If I can get through this, you can get through this. And hopefully you have some building blocks that you can use and extend on this. And there are a lot of tutorials out there for doing different stuff like this. So I encourage you to check those out. Hopefully this one's helpful from a building block standpoint. So let's see, where did we get to our questions? We already got Weird One's question about why not use XY, because we specifically were using UVs on this one. Also, thank you, Weird One, for continuing to be a rock star and supporting people in Discord. I know a lot of you are helping a lot of each other out. I did not get a chance to check that out because it's been kind of crazy week this week, and honestly, getting this tutorial together was kind of a challenge. It's definitely new territory for me. So I don't see any other questions. As always, thanks for being the best part about this adventure. I appreciate all y'all's support, and hopefully I will see you all in the next one or an upcoming Patreon stream or on Discord. Take it easy.